Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining Once Upon a Time in London. This is our third episode. My name is Harry Nijja, the host, and I've got my co-host, Jan, and we've also got a special guest, Kalwant, who's joining us. So really looking forward to this episode. It's going to be about how businesses, particularly IT companies, retain top talent in their team. Before we get into it, Jan, do you want to introduce yourself so everybody knows who you are?
Yeah, my name's Jan Kodabash. I work for Universal Technologies, and I work in London and service clients. What was I saying? I'm helping clients along across the globe, helping them achieve their technology and business goals.
And I can tell you're not in London today.
Yeah.
Are you?
I'm not in London today. No, that's probably why it's not coming out as well. I'm actually in Spain, in Seville. Lovely place if you ever get a chance to come and see it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Kalwant, tell us who you are. Tell us what you do.
So my name's Kalwant Dhindsa. I am a compliance director by profession, and I also specialise in ethics. So I work with organisations to help build cultures of integrity and make sure they've got their ethics in the right place.
Awesome. And my name's Harry Nijja. I am the CEO of Woodstock House, and I work closely with both colleagues on the call. And we got onto a conversation on Zoom recently about ethics and compliance and then employability. And we had a great chat for an hour. And then we thought, you know what, why don't we do it live on LinkedIn? Why don't we do it live on LinkedIn so everybody can listen to it? So that'd be quite cool. But before we get into the topic, so Jan, give us the highlights of this week. What have you been working on?
Apart from walking around Spain, trying to look busy, I've actually done some work as well. We've been looking at these NFV platforms, looking at seeing where generally people will buy appliances or hardware appliances for a specific purpose. These are kind of like multifunctional, where you kind of buy a platform and you can adapt what solution you put on there, what appliance you can put on there virtually. So basically, you buy a piece of hardware and you put the software you want to run, whether it's a firewall, a router, or anything like that. So it gives people a lot more flexibility. So then there's a lot on the market now. So we're looking at the differences of those ones, which ones are probably best, which ones are more suited and cost effective. So that was quite interesting, as well as walking around Seville. The Seville Cathedral, which is lovely. Yeah,
I like this idea of like doing a 9 to 5 in another country. Right?
Yeah.
And then at 5 o'clock, you then do something quite interesting rather than just go home. Like you normally do.
Don't tell my boss, he doesn't actually know I'm here. So we're not live, are we?
Unfortunately, it's all right. He'll watch it on catch up later.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah.
Kalwant, what about you? Is there anything interesting you've been working on this week?
So I've started to put an article together about how to measure integrity within an organisation. So I spent some time doing some research, looking at the various psychological measures that are out there and scales that are out there, and which is the best way to go about measuring that kind of stuff. But the highlight of my week for those in the UK is that Costa have their Terry's hot chocolate out, Terry's chocolate orange.
Oh, really? Right, the special flavour.
Oh, right, okay. I am a Terry's, chocolate fan. I didn't know they have the hot chocolate though.
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll have to try it.
Right. The amount of sugar in a hot chocolate is probably 4 or 5 times. But you're better off. It's healthier to have a bottle of Coke than it is probably to have a hot chocolate. But
as we speak.
You know what? Actually, also, you mentioned measurement. Me and Jan always have this conversation about how do you measure stuff. And I think that we'll obviously we'll touch on that a bit later in the chat. But okay, I think now that we've got the preamble out of the way, I think this topic of top talent, retaining top talent in teams is not only is it such a big topic anyway, but it's so relevant because obviously in the news and the headlines you've got lots of people leaving. There's lots of movement of jobs, or people thinking of COVID as well, where people have reflected on what am I doing with my life. Is this what I really want to do? And that's kind of happened for everyone. So I guess my first question to Jan is, what's your view of this area? What have you seen, particularly in the IT space, when it comes to top talent in companies and how they've been trying to retain it?
So it's It really depends on the individuals themselves. So some are more are driven by having the right experience. I think that's majority of the top talent are really look for developing their experience. So they look to go to places, and so it's easy to maintain them by making sure that they're working on specific projects or developing technology. So they're developing themselves as well. Firstly, it makes them more marketable, but also they've got a real interest in the subject. So that's enough for some people to kind of maintain them. Obviously, there's the other one is monetary. People look to fulfill their life outside of work, and they want to have surplus cash or money to do other things. So I think those are the two main ones. Although I think heavily recently in the last few years, we've seen people's like mental wellness. People just want to change, or people want to do less. And that's a big incentive, or actually that's probably one of the most difficult ones to kind of maneuver around, because we're not really equipped on how to kind of provide that service or satisfaction.
Well, you touched on three things there. You've touched on, like, obviously the reasons that people are moving is money. Maybe they want a bigger stretch, or maybe they want less of a stretch, right? Is there any other like things you've seen which are causing moves right now, or causing that kind of that pain in companies, really, with them losing talent?
Well, it's all since COVID. People are we're all working from home. People kind of adjusted to that, and now companies have seen that as leverage, and they're offering that as an incentive for people to go. So there has been movement in the market already. Whenever there's a few people leaving in a certain area or environment, you'll see a follow-on effect. So there has been movement based on that, where people want to go and work less or be a bit more flexible, work from home because it suits them. So yeah, I think that's one of the main ones that we've seen.
I guess then as we get deeper into this topic is what do you as someone who's managing lots of infrastructure engineers and IT specialists, how have you been navigating this and retaining that talent in your own team? I think that's
it's difficult. It's difficult when you're operating in a smaller organization, I think, because you tend to interface with everyone. Whereas large organizations probably have specific teams that would have that function, and so people have got somewhere to go to. In smaller organizations, they generally would go to their manager, or they'd go to people they work with. So yeah, I've seen that firsthand. And if you're the type of person to kind of sit down and talk about why they're looking to leave, or where they're not happy, that's great. But sometimes you can get caught up in it, and you're busy delivering stuff or working. No one gets a chance to sit down with you and actually say, what's the problem? That's something I've had to learn to do. I'm probably not that good at it, but we don't do that enough. But I think that needs to be formalized. I think I'm not saying it's pointless not doing it. It's what you don't want to do. You don't want to regret saying, well, I did speak to him. But if you can kind of formulate a way of actually doing that repetitively, and even document it, so you can see, maybe someone else can read that document and pick up on, actually, this person said this, and they look at it differently. It might send some signals, but it definitely is more difficult in a small organization, because you've got to actually actively take that time out.
Of course. On that point as well, I guess bringing in Kalwant is like, what Jan mentioned there, it's almost like a roadmap for me, roadmap for individuals for when they join, when they work in, all the way to exit. So what about your view? Do you have any particular views on that, and also around retaining, what should companies be doing to retaining top talent?
I think the biggest thing that companies need to do to retain any talent, retain anyone in the organization, is create an organization where there's psychological safety. Now, that term, psychological safety, it comes from Dr. Amy Edmondson from the Harvard Business School, and it's broken down into 4 stages. So the first stage is that you have an environment where people feel they're included in everything. Secondly, it's a safe environment for them to learn in. And if they're not learning, they can say, I don't know, can you help me? I need training on this point. I've got this. They feel safe enough to say, I don't know everything. Yes, you've hired me. I'm an expert in this. Here's my weakness. Help me here. Rather than here's my weakness. I'm now going to be out the door because I've shown that I've got this vulnerability. The third one is that they feel safe. It's safe for them to contribute and speak up. So if they see something isn't quite right, or they see a better way of doing it, they can speak up and it's going to be heard. And they're not going to be beaten up or booted out because they've spoken up. And then the last one is that they're comfortable enough that they can challenge what's happening without being scared. And all 4 of them come down to that fear factor, which is why it's psychological safety. When you create that kind of environment, people almost feel like they're obliged to say if something isn't quite right. Because they feel so much a part of the company and that their contribution counts, it's safe for them to speak up. If they're safe, they're secure. If they're secure, they're not going to be in such a rush to run out of the door. And even if they are looking to leave because they've seen a better opportunity or there's that career growth, I would say as a manager, as a leader at that point, you'd want to say to them, happy for you to go because I've invested in you. And if I've invested enough that you have grown, by all means go back. Because when they walk out of the door knowing that you've given them that much confidence and helped them grow, they will speak to 20 people and 20 people will then say, wow, that's a good employer. I might want to work for them in the future.
No, I resonate with a lot of that. You know what? The word safety, I've never heard it positioned in that way. Psychological safety as well. You know, that for me is really, really powerful. And I think, you know, if I think about my personal journey of, you know, going, you know, being in corporate and now obviously after doing that for 12 years and leaving into my own company and starting my business, if I had felt safe in any of those jobs, I would probably still be in those jobs.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is kind of interesting, isn't it?
And
what do you think, Jen? What do you think?
Yeah, you know, as a leader, it's very easy to sit in an ivory tower, whereas that's the worst thing because people don't want to be around you. They think you're not interested. And whereas if you have the other kind of leader who's like, I'm one of you, we're all in this together, that immediately gives people that comfort, which is not spoken. It's not necessarily spoken. So just as a real life example, I worked for a company once where the manager, she was a senior, she had a Prada handbag, and every morning she'd come in with her Prada handbag and we'd all be like, wow, that's like a whole month's salary for the rest of us. However, she'd also bring a lunchbox in and it was her daughter's old lunchbox. And just by that small act, we were like, why would you be carrying like this Peppa Pig lunchbox? And she was like, well, I'm not stupid. Why would I want to buy a new one when I've got this perfectly good working one? But just carrying it, it showed a level of humility and immediately it connected her with every single parent employee because they all safe knowing that she was a parent. So she understood if they were running late because their kid was sick or whatever, she understood that.
It's really difficult. I mean, you mentioned that psychological safety and also allowing employees to feel safe, you know, to kind of voice their opinion. But some people are quite happy to, you know, voice their opinion. Some are not so much. That leader almost has to be multifunction because, look, if you're a leader and you've got a company to a certain place by a certain method, it's working for you, and you know it shows that, you know, you've managed to maintain a few people and you've got it's a successful operation. For you to then go and actually now treat maybe, I don't know, 100 employees or more, each with individual needs differently, it's not an easy ask for a leader to do.
No.
Yeah, and so more often than not, they will get it wrong because they're not programmed in that way to kind of, that's always difficult.
Yeah, and that's creating the culture. So it's not just going to be on the leader. Everyone around them is in that position where they feel they are contributing enough that they don't need, they've got the leader there, the leader's giving them direction, the leader's got people beneath them who are also singing from that same hymn sheet.
Yeah.
And so seeing that tone across the top, across the organization, everyone's in it together to help create that environment. It's not all on the leader's head. Leader's there as the figurehead, but then equally with what you're saying, you've got a method that's got your company to where it's got to. The environment outside the company is changing, that you need to keep up with whatever's changing outside in the outside world as well. And that's where the people who are coming in to work for you, they're going to bring all that stuff in from outside, and you've got to be prepared to be able to deal with all of that. So COVID's a classic example. Everyone suddenly, we're all in our living rooms, we've got kids in the background, we're trying to do our Zoom meetings and so on. And you know, your colleague who you didn't know anything about, suddenly you know the name of their dog, their cat, you know.
Yeah.
And it's opened up that level of vulnerability that we would never have had before. But as leaders, if you were still stuck in that place, well, this method has worked for me to get my company to this stage, COVID's completely smashed all of that. So how are you now dealing with this new way? So yeah, there's definitely a level of responsibility on the leader, but it's not all down to the leader. Once they've created that culture where everyone is almost a little mini leader within themselves, because they're all singing from the same hymn sheet as that leader, that's where the difference is.
Yeah, and I think that yeah, I think you're right there in saying that there needs to be more leadership and ownership amongst the team, rather than just pointing to, you know, a bad leader, if you like. It may just be focused on that one person, but I think everyone, I think what I'm trying to say is the responsibility is everywhere, although it gets focused on that one person, if you like. So no, that's an interesting one.
Sorry to butt in on everybody. You know, something that comes to my mind is, and something that's said to me a while ago, you know, historically, the majority of companies or leaders or managers, you know, you have to earn trust in a company. You come in, you're new, you've got to earn your stripes. You know, that's one mentality. But then the other mentality as a manager gives you trust up front. Gives it up front, and then it's on you to retain it. And if you do something, then obviously, so there's that two sides of it, isn't it? I think I was always, as you go into companies, it's always the former. You know, you got to earn it. But as I've grown as an individual and as a leader, as a company, I've realized actually, if I give trust up front, that's actually more powerful.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. I think that's, you know, that's the way I operated as well. But also on going back to the where you talk about trying to retain stuff or allowing them to feel comfortable to leave. I wanted to, and that's happened to me a couple of times where people have come up to me and said, you know what, well, prior to them actually saying they want to leave, maybe I've caught wind that someone has approached them. So I take the initiative to actually go and speak to them about it and say, look, you know what, and in a way where, and what I've done is say, look, I actually don't want you to leave, because personally, just on a personal level, I like working with you, and it's comfortable for me to have you here, because it's always good to go to a workplace where you're comfortable working, because that's half of it for me, is I like working with the people. So once they acknowledge that, but then also say to them, but I understand that this may be an opportunity for you. So I want you to actually look at it like it's an opportunity for you, but don't consider me. I don't want to be selfish in that way, but I actually want you to say realistically. So I'm also being, you know, an emotional part of it, you know, so communicating the emotional part that I've got, but also allowing them to also feel free to make a decision to say, you know what, go for it, you know. I think,
and that's strength as a leader. That's a real strength, to be secure and confident enough, comfortable enough within yourself that you're saying, I want you to grow. If you need to grow elsewhere, by all means, you have my full support. And it comes back to, it's like when we have teachers at school, we always have that one teacher who we remember, who gave us so much confidence that we flourished under them. And it's the same as a leader. The real leaders are the ones who say, you're flourishing. I don't want to stand in the way of your growth.
Yeah, it is hard though, isn't it? Wouldn't you say it is hard to, especially, okay, when well, maybe not especially, but I'm looking at it from a technical perspective. You've invested in this person, they've turned out great. Yeah, they are part, you know, they part of delivering some of the, they've actually put your company where it is now, for example. Yeah, and you're proud of them. Yeah, and then you have to let them go.
And what's not, it won't come back.
Well, I mean, they probably will come back, but it's hard because now you're on this journey with them. You're doing great, and then, you know, that piece of Lego that's been holding up that has gone.
But then also think about it, Jan. Think about it. That person who's flourished in the company who now leaves, theoretically, they're probably going to tell everybody about their story in your company. So now you've got an advocate for working for Jan.
Exactly.
So that you can almost get 100 new applicants just through that one advocate.
Well, they will always remember.
Yeah. No, no, I mean, I think that's definitely the way to do it. I'm just saying, it's not easy. It's definitely not an easy one to let people let people go like that.
I think, you know what it is? It's, for me, there's two lenses. There's a short-term lens and a long-term lens, right? So if a business is operating in this infinite mindset, in this long-term lens, then theoretically, the loss of that individual isn't too great, you know, because you're thinking long-term, thinking years ahead, you know, growth. Whereas most businesses are thinking 90 days, right? Thinking profit, thinking, oh, I've lost this piece, it's going to impact my bottom line this month, next month. But actually, if every business just thinks super long-term and has committed to those values and principles, the loss of that individual isn't as big.
Actually, no, you're actually right there. I mean, if you put it down to the amount of investment we do to maintain a long-term strategy for whether it's you know, economic strategy, if we invest that same amount of time and effort into and Carl, well, maybe we'll come on to that sustainability of our staff, maybe we won't be in that position where that loss hits us that bad. Because we'll have accounted for it. We would have put a life cycle in place to kind of cover for them, so that, you know what, we know maybe in 5 years, you know what, there's a door back for them to come back, and, you know, you kind of grow that. So different tiers of evolution of your workforce. So, like, for example, you know, graduates coming in, by the time they're kind of like an intermediate level, you've got your next intermediate levels becoming specialists, and then they're on their way. So you've kind of tiered that appropriately, but it needs the same amount of investment. And you know, hands up, I think a lot of places that I've worked, or even where, you know, I've had the opportunity, we probably haven't put that much investment in that whole life cycle.
But, no, it's remembering that you have your products that you're selling, your services are through your human resources for a reason. Those humans are your resources. And they are a valuable asset that you want to retain them, but not to the point that you're controlling their life, that they don't want to ever leave you and look at.
So when I remember asking you about when we were talking about sustainability, and it was more around the compliance, and I was talking about sustainability and how an organization is vetted as a sustainable service. And it kind of took me a little bit surprise where you said, you know, one of the main attributors to being sustainable or seen as sustainable is your staff or the people you work with. Whereas I had thought, actually, I was thinking maybe it would be more the way we operate or the way our processes are set. But yeah, maybe if you touch on that part of sustainability.
So when we were having that conversation, really in terms of sustainability, the angle that I was coming from is that exactly what I've just said. The people are the ones who are sustaining your organization. They're the ones, like you said, who will spend 5 years, 10 years with you, growing the organization with you. And it speaks volumes if people stay on at an organization for as long as that. If they do, or alternatively, if they leave saying, you know what, Jan was such a good guy. And they go out and they tell other people about you. And that is sustainability within itself, because they are the ones, if they've watched you grow, they've helped you grow. That was where the sustainability was. That's where the growth was. And that's where they've maintained the organization and helped it to grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. You know what? I need to bring up the elephant in the room, right? The elephant in the room is leaders or managers that shouldn't be in the jobs they're in.
Yeah.
Maybe they were super hot technical person, grew the company, and they were just, everyone pointed to them saying, you should be the manager now.
Yeah.
Because they were the superstars, right? But they have zero management like skills or experiences, lack of emotional intelligence, whatever you want to call it, right? So, you've got those managers in place, the company or people can see, okay, attrition's quite high now because they're not able to maintain or sustain the people under them.
Yeah.
What do we do then?
So if I know, it's true. A lot, before you'd have achieved a lot. The only way of showing that they've appreciated you is, by giving you a promotion.
Yeah.
And because a lot of companies had that single kind of or kind of triangle to the shape to the top where you become, I don't know, associate, VP, whatever else, and up until you're leading the company, those were the only steps you could follow. But I have seen it where some people have been have thought about this, and where they want to show that if you're in the business side of the business, that may work for you. But say, for example, you're in the technical side of the business, you're a technician, or you're a different angle from the business side, and they want to show. So there's a different tiering of appreciation, but you still have maybe the same, I guess, structure, but it's classed differently. I don't know. You're now a top experienced engineer, or whatever they want to call it. But in the company, you've been shown that you provide an accolade to kind of mention that you've actually achieved this. So, and that's worked in some places. That's worked because it's referenced you, and it's shown that you've developed. But yeah, maybe that's one way. But I know what you're saying is that it's difficult. So to go back to the person in that position, if they should be, sometimes it's because of what I've just said. They've been placed there because that's the only way that to reward them.
And this is the interesting thing for me, and it goes back to the start of the conversation when Kalwant said it. It's psychological safety. So, for example, for me, you've got a manager who's not performing, who's obviously a superstar in wherever they've come from in terms of technical ability and stuff, not quite able to lead 10 people under them. But that's whole aspect of psychological safety where now the team can have honest conversations with the manager. Now the CEO can have honest conversations with the manager and say, actually, you know what? We don't think you're absolutely well positioned here, right? Let's put you over here where we can get the most out of you. Do you know what I mean? Like almost the company can govern itself, isn't it? Because everyone feels safe to have those conversations. But I think what the problem is no one's able to have that conversation.
Is it? And it takes the individual themselves to also understand that, put their hands up. I mean, maybe the culture, to say, look, you know what? Maybe they'll have a Liz Truss moment and say, you know what? I'm out. It takes that. They may drag everyone along with them for a few weeks, 45 days or whatever it was, but eventually they have to say, you know what, I'm out. But it is really difficult on that one, because now you've put someone as a leader, and is it seen as, how do you do that? How do you say, you know what? It depends on the individual. I think it really does.
You support them, you provide them with the training and mentoring. And if you see there's the potential for them to change, provide them with that training and mentoring to get them to the that they need to be in.
Yeah. I think, you say that, Kalwant, is that maybe having that experience of, say, so like someone yourself to kind of that sees that is useful, because as a manager you want to ensure that person feels like they're being appreciated, and that the thing for them to do is just promote them. But it's having that other view, say, look, promotion doesn't always mean this. Maybe you need to sit down to see where they need to be, and that kind of life cycle we talked about, maybe that's where it gets I don't know, shoehorned in somewhere, where they're saying, look, what is your development? Do you see yourself being this? Because you all have to manage people. It's really, it's worthwhile having that invested time in there. You won't get to that manager being that person that no one wants to talk to.
Yeah, because it's unfair on them if they've been put into a position simply because they had great technical skills, yet now they've suddenly been given management responsibility, which they never asked for, they never wanted it. Do the right thing as an employer and support them there.
Yeah. What about then if the company is still successful and you know, the company's still successful and the people are, you know, that, you know, maybe they're not having a great retention rate, but ultimately what is the company being judged on? It's I guess if you're looking at it from a people perspective, maybe they're not doing as good, but on the markets, it's one of the top companies.
It's going to quickly fall apart though, isn't it? That's not sustainable. So yes, profits are great. You've got a high staff turnover. People aren't going to want to come to work for you because your reputation is so bad. If your reputation is so bad and people won't work for you, slowly those profits are going to dwindle.
So I know we haven't got much time, but I just want to go back to that. If we talk about eventually it will happen, what measures are put in place? And what, say, 3 key measures would be put in place? How can we measure it to say, actually, oh, you know what, we've outperformed last year in terms of our sustainability? Is it just retention?
It's going to be retention. I think is exactly what we said at the start of the call, actually, when I was talking about what I've been researching this week, which is measuring the culture within the organization.
I mean, how do you do that? I mean,
I've been researching, there's various psychological tools out there that they use in organizations to measure where they're up to. So yes, you've got your financial measurements, 100%, your P&L is going to tell you everything from that side, but the real inside story is going to be, how are people feeling in the organization? And if all of them are saying, we just can't wait to get out of here, there goes your sustainability and your profits in 5 years' time.
Luckily for me, I work with lots of different clients, and one of the clients I work with, a really good one, you know, they've got about 100 staff, and they put something in recently, which was a survey, a pulse survey. It's a daily survey. So you go onto Slack, and before you go onto Slack, you have to give a score out of 5 of how you're feeling.
Yeah.
So it gives the management team an understanding of where the pulse is of the business. So, for example, if someone's been doing 5, 4, 5, 4, and then they suddenly drop to 1 or 2, that's flagged immediately to the manager. And so what they told me why they did this, because things were happening and they just couldn't see it. There was no like ability to see a problem before, like they couldn't remedy it. It was already like a massive problem. They wanted to kind of figure it out quicker. So I think that was quite useful. I guess some businesses are going to have to find that, aren't they? Where they're on the pulse and they can react.
Yeah. And the technology is there to do all of that automatically. So it's not hard.
Well, it's getting there. Well, you know what, also, Jan, before I know we're running over time, but before we actually end, there's one thing we had a chat about, which I think I want to capture on LinkedIn Live and also make a clip out of for your profile, right? Is this idea, because you presented it to me on a whiteboard and you said, Harry, look at this. I've got this elastic engineer. And I was like, what's this? So pitch me the elastic engineer, because I think everyone should hear what this is what you built. It's kind of cool. I find it cool.
Well, I guess it came from the challenge was speaking to people and or organize companies or clients that were looking at resource issues they had. And so generally, if you take a resource on, it's quite expensive. But also getting the best out of that resource, they often find that, say, a high technical resource is brought into the company and he stays out throughout that company at quite a high rate. But in terms of the capability he's required or the services he's required to deliver, doesn't always throughout the year leverage his top key skills. And so if you look at it from a commercial perspective, value for money of what they're getting back doesn't really work out. And so they're able just to maintain 1 or 2 people. So what we looked at doing was, okay, well, what if we provided a service where a company like ourselves, or there's a lot of solution providers out there. From our perspective, we've got a lot of capability, and in terms of technology, the scope's wide. We've got junior engineers, senior engineers, and what I put to them was, okay, well, what if we could tier it? We provide you subscription, and then as long as we've got some type of schedule and we know in advance, you can pick an engineer to work with you for a specific period in the project. For example, let's take a design of a network or a new data center. Initially, a lot of the brains goes into right at the beginning, where they need someone who's really technical to go and do a lot of the design, the architecture, to go to those discussions. You'd only need that person for maybe the first, say, 3 months, so they can draw on that subscription just for that. Then, as they plan that project out, they need someone who's more of an implementer. He's got all the information he needs. He just needs to go and implement them. And so the implementation can then be drawn out as well. And so a different tiering, a different costing can be for that type of engineer. Yeah. And so you're pulling on the different tiers of that subscription based on what you need. Yeah. And so rather than taking one person on, expecting him also, and now that when you take an engineer who's expected to go and do a piece of work that's not really something he's interested in, but he's been taken on, that's his job, that also goes back to, is he going to be happy doing that?
Yeah.
So that kind of elastic engineer approach or subscription approach was something that works quite well. Yeah,
let's get the ethics and compliance review on that. What do you reckon, Kalwant? Is that what would your view on that be?
The whole elastic engineer thing just sounds awesome.
Yeah. It's not me stretched out, actually, like that, but I think it could work in some places. It could definitely work for them, and it for the engineer themselves as well. It suits their their requirements as well. They're doing stuff that they're trained to do and want to do as well. So
the one thing I liked most about it is what you said, that say a client draws on that subscription, draws on like maybe the lower engineer, right? But then also with the lower rated engineers on site, I say call it lower, but maybe less experienced, but he's got an issue, right? He can then just call up and talk to all the other senior engineers in the team.
Oh yeah,
so it's almost that ability to kind of almost up and down scale quickly.
Well, exactly, and you're extending your team. You're actually creating an extension of your team, yeah, to different tierings, yeah. And over time, as long as you go, like for example, if you go with a model that maintains throughout your project, you maintain that capability. They work alongside you, so you're maintaining capability. You're not losing that capability. You're maintaining it. So yeah, that
amazing.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah, the elastic engineer.
I love it. Well, look, guys, thank you so much
Yeah.
today. Really enjoyed the chat. I think this topic is obviously really huge, but I've learned so much from this. And yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Kalwant. Thank you, Jan. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.